But England have got a very interesting group. They're in Group B. So I'll bring up now what that looks like so we can sort of talk about it as a talking point, really, from an England perspective. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got two home nations that could be that final seed. You've got the USA, who we haven't beaten at a World Cup, I don't think. And you've got Iran, who politically, between the three of those other teams, is politically charged. So they're also on kind of home turf in the Middle East. So they'll probably have quite a few fans behind them as well, you'd imagine. They're one of the big hitters in the Asian division.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's difficult. I think on world rankings, Group B is probably one of the better averages, which is mad.
If you combine the world rankings, it is technically the hardest group, but it's not. It's not at all.
No, but then you've got obviously that final berth, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a minute, which is going to be one of either the two home nations, Scotland or Wales, or the Ukraine. So in terms of emotional charge, it's just laced with different energy, isn't it?
Oh, this group is narrative central, but there's a few of them that are like that. But no, honestly, without sounding too much like a biased fan, England have to top this group. There would have been very few draws that England could have got where they wouldn't have been the favourites to top the group because of their recent form in international tournaments, which is fantastic. But I look at this group and think it is a favourable draw. If you look at some of the second-seeded teams that we could have picked up, the likes of Netherlands, Germany were in there as well, Denmark maybe, we'll be happy with what we've got, definitely. I think it's really telling that the conversation has been more on what the story will be rather than what the performance will be for each game. Because there is, like you say, narrative everywhere. And don't get me wrong, there will be tests within that group. If Wales qualify, we've seen England struggle against Wales. If Scotland qualify, we saw England struggle against Scotland in the Euros. So it's not a given that they'll win each game, but I'm really happy with it as a draw. I think the biggest threat, obviously, is probably the US, but they kind of flattered in their qualifying campaign. It took them a long time to get through. They only qualified on the last day, and Canada flew through their group. But this is a very different American team to I think we've ever seen at an international tournament. It's always a weird one with America, isn't it? Because sport is such a massive part of their culture, but they've never really adopted soccer. The amount of money that's invested into sport in the US is why in pretty much every single other sport, they are at the very top of the game. If you look at the Olympics, then it's always the US at the top because they have the facilities to succeed. Now that's finally starting to come through in football. And you can see some big players at big clubs across Europe now. It's not going to be a walkover, but England have got to be confident. And really, this is a chance to build some momentum before the knockout stages of the group. They've got to be looking for 3 wins. I honestly think that. I think they've got the depth to do that.
I think you're reluctant as an Englishman to sound arrogant saying that. I think we've been guilty in the past of being arrogant when we've absolutely not been anywhere near the strength we are now. But I think if you looked at these teams and played them in a friendly capacity, you'd imagine us absolutely annihilating them each individually on our day without any pressure. So that's the difference for me, is how do each of those teams respond to a World Cup environment? We know Scotland will raise their game if they're through. We know Wales will because they bring all their fans with them as well, and it changes it. It's like a Premier League fixture, isn't it? So I'm hoping neither of those get through. And then for the others, it literally is on their day, how much will they bring to this game? Will it be enough to overcome whatever England have to offer? And that's another thing. It's all on England, really, to play the way we know they can play as efficiently as they can. Because like we said before with this England team, the starting 11 isn't actually decided. We know most of the starting 11, but the rest of the places are kind of up for grabs, mostly up front. So we could interchange depending on who the opponents were. And that'd be the interesting thing for me to see what Gareth Southgate does with each of those fixtures.
I'm not sure that most of the 11 is decided, to be honest. I think there would be very, very few players that are an automatic start at the moment, because I think partly because the tournament is still a way off and you don't know who's going to be available through injury or what sort of form players are going to be going into the tournament or something. But I think short of Harry Kane and probably John Stones and probably Maguire, I don't think anyone else is a guaranteed start, really. Declan Rice?
Okay. Rice absolutely is,
That's probably it. Those four.
I think I'd like to think Jude Bellingham has played himself into contention, to be fair.
exact contention. I don't think he's guaranteed though, because he loves Henderson, he loves Phillips as well. So Phillips might not even make the squad at this rate because he's been injured so much. We don't know. But I think you're right. England fans have tendencies of sounding quite arrogant going into a tournament because they've never had any reason to back it up. We've had 2 very good tournaments now in a row, and Southgate's built a great philosophy. And this generation of English talent not only looks brilliant on paper, but actually gels together very well. Southgate's done a really good job at almost making it like a club squad. I don't think it is arrogance this time. I think it can be realism and confidence and optimism that actually we should be going into this tournament thinking whoever we come up against, we'll give them a game, because in the Euros, we were 1 kick away from winning it. I would argue that the squad that we'll take to this World Cup is better than the squad that we've had from the last 2 tournaments.